Something just happened in tennis that even the people who spent years telling you the GOAT debate was already settled cannot stop talking about. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why the entire conversation just quietly, permanently changed. But before I show you what tipped it, I need you to understand what almost stopped it from happening at all. Because 5 weeks before this moment, the same player was sitting in a locker room having just been knocked out a grand slam in a shocking early upset, and legends were already starting to whisper that maybe his run was cooling off. So how does a player go from an embarrassing exit like that to legends comparing him directly to the greatest to ever hold a racket in the space of a single summer? Stick with me, because the answer involves a coach who has trained 3 legends himself, a joke from a rival that was not really a joke at all, and one sentence from the guy at the center of it all that tells you everything about why this debate refuses to die. Before we go further, I need a small favor from you, and I promise it is worth it. If you have ever watched a debate like this online and felt like nobody was actually breaking it down properly, giving you the real story instead of just hot takes and clickbait headlines, then that is exactly why this channel exists. Hit subscribe right now, because every person who subscribes tells us that fans still want the full story, not just a 30-second clip. So if you want to actually understand what changed and why every legend in tennis is suddenly talking about it, subscribe before you keep watching, because what happens in the second half of this video will completely change how you see this player. His name is Jannik Sinner, and right now he is the #1 ranked men's tennis player in the world, sitting on 5 Grand Slam titles at just 24 years old. But numbers alone do not start a GOAT debate. Moments do. And this year gave tennis one of the strangest, most whiplash-inducing moments in recent memory. A stretch where Sinner looked human, then looked untouchable, then looked like something the sport had never quite seen before. Let's go back to the beginning of the year, because you need to feel the low point before you can understand how big the turn really was. At the Australian Open, Sinner ran into Novak Djokovic, and Djokovic beat him. Not a scare. Not a close call people forgot about. An actual defeat on one of the biggest stages in the sport, in front of a crowd that had been debating for years whether this new generation was really ready to take the crown. For a moment, the old guard reasserted itself, and the conversation quietly shifted back to where it had always lived, with Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal sitting untouched at the top. Then came the French Open, and this is a part of the story that almost nobody saw coming. Sinner, the world #1, the man everyone expected to dominate Clay's season, suffered a shocking 5-set loss to Juan Manuel Cerundolo in the second round. Read that again. Second round. An early exit at a Grand Slam is the kind of result that ends debates, not starts them. For a few days, the tennis world treated it like confirmation, like proof that maybe the throne was not as secure as everyone thought. And that is exactly the moment you need to hold on to, because everything that happened next only means what it means because of how low this stretch really was. Because instead of spiraling, Sinner did something that legends do and pretenders do not. He turned that heartbreak into fuel almost immediately. He went on to complete the career Golden Masters in Rome, becoming just the second man in history after Rafael Nadal to win all 3 clay court Masters events, Monte Carlo, Madrid, and Rome, in the very same season. Let that sink in. The same clay season where he had just been humiliated at the French Open became the season where he achieved something only one other player in history had ever done. Then he took that momentum onto hard courts and grass, and the streak that followed is a kind of run that forces broadcasters to pull out record books mid-match. He strung together victories at Indian Wells, Miami, and Monte Carlo, extending a Masters 1,000 winning streak that climbed into the 20s, one of the longest such runs the ATP Tour has ever recorded. He became the youngest player in the Open era to complete every hard-court big title, 2 Grand Slams, 6 Masters 1,000 trophies in the ATP Finals, and somewhere in the middle of that stretch, he quietly picked up his 350th career win, becoming the first man born in the 2000s to reach that number. This was not a comeback story anymore. This was a player rewriting what a comeback is even supposed to look like. And then Wimbledon arrived, and this is where the suspense really starts, because Sinner walked into the tournament in the strangest possible position for a defending champion. He had not played a single grass court warm-up event all season. None. 0 matches on grass heading into the one tournament that demands more grass court instinct than any other. He was walking in almost blind, on the surface that punishes hesitation the most, carrying the weight of being the man everyone was aiming for. He made it to the final anyway. And waiting for him, there was Alexander Zverev, a player who had lost to Sinner 9 times in a row, now finally playing his first career Wimbledon final at 29 years old, with every reason in the world to believe this might finally be his moment to break the curse. For a set, it looked like it might actually happen. Zverev came out sharp, aggressive, unloading on his serve, and took the opening set in a tiebreak. For the second year in a row, Sinner found himself a set down in a Wimbledon final. And if you know anything about tennis, you know that is exactly the kind of moment that either builds a legend or ends one early. Which one was this going to be? Sinner answered slowly, patiently, the way players who are not afraid of the moment tend to answer. He leveled the match in a second set tiebreak. He took the third set. He took the fourth. Nearly 4 hours after it began, he closed out 6-7, 7-6, 6-3, 6-4, becoming the 10th man in the Open era to defend a Wimbledon title back-to-back, and claiming his 5th career Grand Slam trophy in the process. And here is where it gets emotional, because after the match, Sinner did not talk like a man chasing history. He talked like a man who understood exactly how rare this really is. Playing in a Grand Slam final is incredibly rare and special, he said afterward, adding quietly that he now has 5 of them in his whole life. Even Zverev, standing right next to him with a runner-up trophy in his hands, could not help but half joke about the beating he had just taken again, admitting with a laugh that he was starting to lose count of how many times in a row Sinner had now beaten him, before turning serious and telling the crowd that Sinner had shown once again exactly why he is the best player in the world right now. Now here is where the real story of this video begins, because it was not the trophy that reignited the GOAT conversation. It was what happened after it, when legends who do not hand out praise easily suddenly could not stop talking about him. Jimmy Connors, a man who has seen every era of the sport up close, chose to focus on the physical way Sinner moves, saying the strength and power behind his shots is genuinely impressive to watch. And when asked directly whether he sides with Sinner or with an injured, absent Alcaraz right now, Connors did not hesitate to lean toward the man who was actually on the court delivering. But it goes deeper than one legend's opinion. A veteran coach, someone who has personally guided legends like Andre Agassi, Andy Roddick, and Andy Murray to their own careers, was asked point-blank where the current generation stands in tennis history. And his answer was specific, in a way that should make you sit up. He placed Djokovic at number 1, Nadal at number 2, Federer at number 3, followed by Sampras, Borg, and Laver rounding out his top 6. But here's the part that matters. He said that from position 7 onward, the debate is genuinely open, not closed. Open. For a coach of that caliber to even suggest there is room being created near the edge of the all-time list is not a small thing. That is a door being left ajar that used to be nailed shut. And even Sinner himself has been dragged into this conversation directly. Asked flat out whether his level of consistency means he belongs in the same breath as the big 3, and true to his usual humility, he pushed back gently, insisting that Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal are still operating in a league of their own. But here's the thing about humble denials from someone performing at this level. The more he deflects it, the more the sport keeps asking the question anyway, and that alone tells you something the stat sheet cannot. So why has the debate genuinely changed instead of just getting louder? Because for years, the conversation around the next generation was built on potential, on flashes of brilliance, on players who looked like the future but had not yet survived the brutal, grinding proof that greatness actually demands. This year gave the sport something different. It gave them a player who got humiliated in the second round of Grand Slam, and instead of folding, responded by completing a feat only Rafael Nadal himself had ever accomplished, then defended a Wimbledon title from a set down for the second year running. All in the same handful of months. That is not potential anymore. That is proof. And proof is the one thing this generation had never fully delivered before this year. Here is the part one need you to really think about before this video ends. Sinner is 24 years old. Djokovic did not win his 5th Grand Slam until he was significantly older. Federer's era-defining dominance was still years away from him at this exact age. Which means if this trajectory holds, if this pattern of collapsing and then immediately rebuilding something historic continues, the sport is not just watching a great player right now. It may be watching the early chapters of the exact story legends will be comparing everyone else to 20 years from now. That is why this debate has changed. Not because one trophy was lifted on center court, but because the way he responded to failure this year looked less like a rising star and more like the era-defining pattern the greatest of all time always seemed to share. So here's the real question, and I want you to actually answer in the comments before you go anywhere. Does what Sinner did this year, collapsing the French Open and then answering it with history at Wimbledon, actually move him into the same sentence as Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, or is it still too early to say that out loud? If this breakdown gave you a completely different way of seeing this debate, hit subscribe right now, because the next chapter of the story is going to keep writing itself all season long, and I do not want you missing a single part of it. Drop your take in the comments. Tell me exactly where you rank him right now, and I will be reading every single one before his next Grand Slam.